A multi-year debt crisis that affected the European Union (EU) from 2009 to the mid to late 2010s is known as the European debt crisis, also known as the Eurozone crisis or the European sovereign debt crisis. In this video, we will be talking about the causes and consequences of the Eurozone debt crisis. The Eurozone debt crisis, as per the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, was hands down the greatest threat to the globe in 2011, and matters kept growing worse in 2012. When the world first got to know that Greece could default on its debt in 2009, the crisis had officially begun. It grew in 3 years to the point where Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Ireland's sovereign debt defaults were a real possibility. It was difficult for the European Union to support these members, which was led by Germany and France. ECB and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, bailouts were requested by them. International Monetary Fund, although despite these actions, many people continued to doubt if the euro was sustainable at all or not. Causes. First, those that transgressed the debt-to-GDP limits established by the EU's original Maastricht criteria were not punished. This happened due to the fact that France and Germany were also spending more than they were supposed to, and it would be unfair to penalize others until they cleaned up their own mess. Except for expulsion from the Eurozone, a severe punishment that would damage the power of the euro itself, none of the sanctions had any teeth. The EU wished to increase the influence of the euro. Second, the power of the euro helped the nations in the Eurozone. They took pleasure in the reduced amount of interest rates and higher investment capital. The majority of this capital influx into the southern countries came from Germany and France, and as a result of the increased liquidity, salaries and prices climbed, lowering the competitiveness of their exports. Countries utilizing the euro were not able to reduce currency printing or boost interest rates, which are two common ways known to reduce inflation. Tax receipts decreased during the recession, but public spending increased to cover unemployment and other benefits. Third, by being overly restrictive, austerity measures impeded economic growth. They raised the unemployment rate, decreased consumer spending, and decreased the amount of capital required for lending. Greek people were fed up with the economic crisis and overturned the Greek government by casting an equal number of votes for the Syriza party, which opposes austerity measures. However, the new administration worked to maintain austerity. In the long run, austerity measures will help to resolve the Greek debt situation. Consequences. First, the deal proposed by Merkel was rejected by the UK and several other EU nations that do not belong to the Eurozone. They feared that the agreement would result in a two-tier EU. The nations of the Eurozone might draft preferential agreements that would exclusively apply to their citizens and leave out non-Euro EU nations. Second, countries within the Eurozone must consent to spending reductions, which could impede their economy's expansion, as it did in Greece. The political reception of these austerity measures has been relatively poor. New leaders who might exit the EU or the Eurozone could be elected by voters. Third, a brand new funding option called a Eurobond has been accessible. The Eurozone countries completely guaranteed the 700 billion euros in Eurobonds that are used to support the ESM. 11 the same as US. Treasury notes, a secondary market would be available for buying and selling these bonds. The Eurobonds may result in higher interest rates in the United States by competing with treasuries.